What's going on, YouTube? We're back at it for another video. Today we've got the best loadout inside of Helldivers 2. Now this is going to be one of those loadouts that is just going to be the most well-rounded, give you a little bit of everything that you would need from match to match, even give you the capability of soloing all the content inside of Helldive difficulty. It's extremely strong, has great single target and crowd control capabilities, and on top of that can literally be slotted into pretty much any team composition. Now the number one thing I need to state at the beginning of this is not the end-all be-all only build you should be running when it comes to playing Helldivers 2. This is just going to be one of those builds that's perfect for just about any operation that you may be facing off with. It's going to be perfect for going up against any one of those different type of modifiers and harder difficulties, and just slot into any group of randoms you may be playing with and be capable of not only helping carry that team, but at the same time, if all three of them are down and you're down to 0 reinforcements waiting on a cooldown, this is something you can utilize to be able to hold your own and bring back that team. It's a very powerful one, and let's get down to the details with it. Now, when it comes to our primary weapon, there's a couple of different options that we have available to us, and some that I would say are better for one side than the other. Now, the first one is going to be the Scorcher on the automaton side of things, but I know some people may not have this yet, but I do need to key highlight this, as this is something that is going to be worth the grind by going through that base war bonds and getting all the way to the bottom for that last weapon. It's gonna be a solid weapon. It's worth it. It's gonna have some explosive damage to it though. That's gonna be great when it comes to facing off with the automatons, but it's a little bit counterintuitive when it comes to facing off with the Terminate side of things, as this will have splash damage. So any of those smaller bugs that are just all around you, you start getting closed in, one of those little grasshoppers comes right up on you and you shoot them in the face, well, guess what? It's blowing up in your face, and you're gonna be able to just end yourself and blow yourself to bits very quickly with this weapon. Even one of those moments that you need to be careful when it comes to shooting close to some type of cover next to you, you can even end yourself in those moments. It's really frustrating. I've had it happen way too many times before, and you'll see it in the gameplay footage coming up. And when it comes to a different option that you would use for the automaton side of things, the SG-8S Slugger is going to be a great option, as well as it will give you the capability of stun locking those medium robots, the ones that are the rocket dominators and that of that Gatling laser sentry shield carriers. Now, do be mindful that you will want to hit the main body, not the shield. It does have a little bit of armor penetrating power, more than what it states on here, but not for everything, and I believe that's why it doesn't state that. It will be able to punch holes inside of some of those bots, and it will be able to keep them at bay. And what I mean keep them at bay, the best thing about this is the simple fact that it will stun lock those rocket dominators. Stopping them from shooting those rockets can be extremely life-saving, and if you're working with a team of people and you don't have the Scorcher already, this is an excellent option to help in those situations. But overall, if you don't want to use either one of those and you're possibly looking for the primary weapon when it comes to the Terminate side of things, the SG-225 Breaker is going to be one of your best bets, and at the same time, a great secondary option to that would be the SMG-37 Defender, as it does have strong capabilities of holding its own and a little bit of crowd control. Now, a lot of people in my comments on my best guns video just cannot stop talking about that Breaker Incendiary, so that's definitely an option if you're playing with groups. I would not consider this something that would be very viable, if viable at all, when it comes to solo play. Do not use this against the automatons either. Some people are trying to argue that this is good against the robots. It's just simply not. I've used it before. It is not in that case. In the strongest category, it is going to be something that will spread fire damage to a lot of different type of enemies, and it is basically good at killing small enemies. That's about where its strongest suit is, and it makes sense because it's birdshot that's incendiary. When it comes to our secondary, the P19 Redeemer is going to be the option you want. It's going to be the most consistent. You really can't go wrong with this thing. It's always going to be true and reliable, and it has quite a lot of damage that it can deal by itself. And when you've run out of primary weapon ammo, this is always going to be the best in slot when it comes to switching over. A lot of people will make strong suited statements about the Senator, but there's nothing worse than running out of 6 rounds, and then next thing you know, you're just kiting a bunch of enemies that you can't end up taking on, because guess what? You're loading one bullet at a time. It's just, you can make all the arguments you want in the comments about this weapon, but overall, when it comes to the general populace, the Redeemer is going to be the better option. When it comes to the grenade, I usually use the Special Impact G16 grenade. This is going to be something that just has the capability of immediately dishing out that massive amount of damage, and the only time I generally switch it over is going to be for the G12 high explosive when I'm running blitz missions, when I'm going to need that capability of taking out those bug holes and those automaton fabricators. As with the impact grenade, it can be a little bit tricky when you need to arc this at a certain angle, as if it hits the rim of the automaton fabricator or even the bug hole, it'll blow up right there and not actually end up closing that hole or destroying that fabricator. Really frustrating in those instances. Keep that in mind when it comes to that. You may end up like me and forgetting every single time to change this over, but when you do change it over, it is quite refreshing for those missions. Now, when it comes to the stratagem, there are 3 of them that I say are finite for this type of loadout or build, and then there's one of them you can kind of interchange based on the mission you're going on or based on the other players you may be playing with. But when it comes to solo play, I will show you the 4 that I would say are definitely going to be the most worthwhile for you. But starting off with one of the definite finites is going to be the shield generator pack. This is going to be great for both the automaton side of things and the Terminid, arguably at Helldive difficulty. That shield generator is almost a must on the automaton side of things. You can get away without having it, but it's going to be noticeable if you've used it before and then you don't have it. It can be quite painful, and more than likely if you run a few of those missions, ended up dying and then didn't have that shield while facing off trying to go get your shield, you notice the difference real quick. But the big thing people may not understand about the shield is it's also going to be beneficial for the Terminid side of things for a multitude of things, including melee strikes. Melee is going to get absorbed by this shield now. Bugs can encroach inside of the shield and steal damage directly to you, but if they're just outside the edge, they will start hitting that actual shield and it'll block their attacks, which is really great against those grasshoppers, those little mini stalkers that can end up getting that CC on you or that crowd control effect of slowing you down. This will actually protect you from those instances. And if you've ever had that moment when you're facing off with a Bile Titan or one of those bloaty bugs, you dodge just at the right time, but it seems like your toenails just got hit by some of that vomit and somehow you instantly died. This is going to protect you in certain instances like that, creating a bit more of that survivability and a little bit more leniency with that timing of that dodge when it comes to avoiding some of that puke. Really frustrating in those moments, and this can be life-saving in those instances. Coming up next, we've got the Railgun Stratagem. This is going to be absolutely mandated when it comes to solo play. If you're trying to solo with this build, this is an absolute must. This is going to give you the capability, especially against the automatons, with facing off with those hulks and being able to take them down efficiently, because if you're solo and somehow you're trying to pretend or you're trying to tell me that you can always get around to the backside of those hulks as they're charging you with all those medium bots every single time, you're lying. You can try and argue me in the comments below, but you're not actually getting that done. You can get it done in groups, but overall, when it comes to facing off with hulks, generally, you're rarely ever getting the capability of seeing that backside unless you've got a buddy that's kiting that thing away. And even then, it takes quite a few rounds just to take down that Hulk by hitting that weak spot, and it can be extremely frustrating when you're dealing with everything else around it. So having that railgun is going to be perfect for those moments to be able to deal damage no matter what and stun lock that Hulk anytime that it's bum rushing you or possibly bum rushing some of your teammates, and giving you the capability of possibly one-shotting it if you hit it in that little red eye, and we'll talk about that once we get into the gameplay footage. But it's also going to give us the capability of dealing additional damage that we'll need against those heavier enemy types that we'll be facing off in a multitude of different situations, and giving us that compensating amount of DPS in case some of our stratagems are on cooldown. Now, when it comes to the third finite stratagem, I would say is going to be Eagle Airstrike. This is arguably one of the most versatile of the stratagems. It gives you a little bit of everything when it comes to area of effect damage, explosive damage, high damage, and giving you that capability of damaging pretty much everything in the game to a certain extent, with the capability of having a good one-shot power against some of those heavily armored enemies, such as things like the Charger, the heavily armored tanks. Even sometimes, if you can line this up right, you can get those cannon turrets over on the automaton side of things, but at the same time, it's going to close up the bug holes, destroy the fabricators, give you a little bit more leniency, and it's got a low cooldown of possibly 2 to 3 minutes, generally only 2 minutes unless you have that modifier that increases cooldown by 50%, and it gives you 3 uses every time you have it. Now, when it comes to the fourth option, If you're going solo, I would make a strong argument that the Eagle 110mm rocket pods are going to be your best option, as it gives you a little bit more of that capability of single target damage. If you're solo, you're going to be kiting certain enemies, and this is going to be one of those that gives you the capability of kind of just tossing this and not having to worry about how strategic you threw that or where it's going to land. As long as it's near the target, it'll generally hit that one singular target that you need it to hit. But if you're not a big fan of this and you are playing with groups of randoms, this is something you could slot out for. Something like the orbital laser is a great option. It's going to give you the capability of having a bit more of that crowd control and single target damage. Arguably, if you're playing solo, you could possibly play around with this. I'm not going to, sit there and be a stickler and say you have to go with the rocket pods. This can be a great option, but you'll only get 3 uses of it. Now, the other option I would say that could be possible to throw on instead of that rocket pod is going to be the orbital rail cannon strike, but this one is going to be one of those that will only have the capability of taking 1 shot every 3 minutes. Now, it is devastating. It will be able to just take out pretty much whatever it hits. In that instance, with the rocket pod, there can be a little bit of inconsistency, but generally it will deal some damage, and we can compensate that with the railgun. When it comes to the rail cannon, it's going to be that one thing done. You will have to wait that time frame and then rely on both the airstrike and the railgun from that point going forward, especially if you're solo. But with the rocket pods, you've got 3 different uses. You can combine it with the railgun and compensate to combine both of those damage types to make it the most efficient type of combination when it comes to dealing out that damage when it comes to heavy enemy types. But that's going to be the loadout right there, guys. We're going to jump into the gameplay now, give you a couple of those tips and tricks on how to effectively give the full rundown on how this build works. So we're rolling into a retrieve valuable data mission. Very difficult when you're solo, considering you do have to carry 2 of these hard drives all the way over to the main objective at the very end, but I was having trouble with my matchmaking. I couldn't find an SOS. I couldn't join into other players, so I just started my own and then would drop my own SOS, but immediately I had a pretty hot drop coming in straight on top of some automaton base. I've got mortars coming in at me. It was a bit of a nightmare at the beginning, but quickly try to just take out as much as possible. We already got a drop straight on us, so I'm throwing one of those airstrikes in, trying to clear that up as I grab up my essentials effectively and salute each one of my airstrikes. So we got to make sure we're standing tall for democracy and spreading it through the power of airstrikes. But in these moments, if you haven't already understood, crouching is always going to make your accuracy so much better. But over on our left, we did have a base, so I immediately just tossed in one of those airstrikes just to clear that up real quick, as if you do clear up more of the automaton bases, there will be less forces to deal with as you go forward. It's kind of one of those moments where if you only go after the main objectives, that's when those bot drops are going to be even stronger as you go through, and it can end up in one of those situations where you're getting multiple locations of bot drops going off, and it's just going to be crawling everywhere. So in this moment, I'm just kind of utilizing some of those airstrikes, getting rid of some of those bases, and trying to just clear things around me as I'm making my way over to the main objective to turn on the power. And on top of that, you'll notice that I just sent my Eagle to go rearm after we took out that last base. That way I can fully restock before we make it over to that main objective. I'm already in the clear right now. We've got a little bit of breathing room here, essentially. And one thing to also talk about with the Scorcher is you'll notice we're able to take out those Star Wars walkers by just shooting them in the leg based on its explosive damage. It's pretty nice. But you'll notice now we've got the position of where those mortars are coming in from. We've got another bot drop on our left. We're still on cooldown, so I start to just kind of like mulch through some of the enemies just behind me. Always stuck on reload. It's one of those big issues that I'll probably never get over inside of this game. And inevitably, the number one issue with the Scorcher is just not enough ammunition in each one of those magazines. But we're quickly taking out some of these enemies. The bot drops are kind of closing in, and then I notice we've got another one of those Gatling shield guys, so immediately I'm just booking it as far as I can, getting a repositioning to make sure I can get the angle on that guy without taking too much damage, because they can put you down pretty quickly even with the shield. This planet is a nightmare with sun glare. I mean, the sun's really in my eyes here, and I'm basically only shooting at where those lasers are coming from. But generally, you are going to aim for the backpack on the back of those Gatling guys with the railgun, that's going to one-shot them, but generally it's going to be 2 shots. If you don't land that first shot, try to avoid hitting the shield as it will diminish the damage. But now we're able to take down that mortar emplacement. Generally, you will be able to take down the mortar emplacements with just 2 grenades to each one of its installments. But sadly enough, you won't be able to get that done with the Scorcher. But later on, you'll notice we've got a little bit of capability with the Scorcher when it comes to weak spots of some of these emplacements later on. But sadly enough, they won't be good against the emplacements that are the mortars, the anti-aircraft guns, and the weaker of the 2 tanks, the one with the guns on top. We'll see one of those here coming up soon. But we'll be able to take each one of these out with just 2 nades each. And it's quite nice. But now, the boys have joined in from the SOS, and then next thing you know, I see they're getting the main objective. So I see over on my right, there's another side objective over here, that little pod on the ground. So I decide I'm just going to head over there. Nothing's really going on at the main objective, so why not get this? Try and help some other people out get their XP. I'm already at level 50. This XP just doesn't matter to me. At this point, I'm just having a good time playing through each one of the matches, and basically, a lot of times I'm just joining in with randoms, following them, and just kind of providing some type of overwatch in a way, and just playing around with different combinations of stratagems. But generally, this is the number 1, but this is going to be the weaker of the 2 tanks. We're easily able to just toss 2 of those impact grenades, take that out like it's nothing. And we'll be able to make quick work out of the other tanks later on as well. Moving from that point though, they've already reactivated the power generator. I noticed that K4 is over there and he's doing the radar tower, which if you complete the radar tower, that's one of those side objectives that'll actually reveal everything on the map for you. It'll reveal every minor location, the bases, what the different type of bases are, if there's mortar emplacements, the anti-air, the stratagem jammers, or the Eye of Sauron, the one that's just like the bot detector thing going around. Every one of those locations and side objectives that you have available to you can be revealed through something like this. So I decided to throw out my last airstrike over there, just trying to kind of push the enemies back that were just behind us, give us a little bit of breathing room, if not just clear a bit of the pack to where we have enough time to capture that objective. I wasn't certain how far along he was actually. I should, or arguably, a lot of times you should just communicate with your teammates with the open mic, but since I'm streaming generally, I try to do the push to talk, and not always is everybody willingly available to just start communicating, but luckily enough, nonverbal cues are still pretty prevalent in this game, and you can be able to just kind of mark locations and people will hopefully see what you're trying to point out. But effectively, we've got another one of those hulks over here. We're just utilizing that railgun to the fullest, giving us every bit of that power, trying to get that little green dot on that little red eye and the face of that hulk. It's a bit difficult, especially at distance. I really wish it had some type of zoom to it, but this is one of those nonverbal cue moments. We've got all those enemies over there. I'm trying to point out the interest over here on the left that it's clear. We're trying to move over to the next objective. But then old S3 over there, or yeah, S3 decided he was going to aggro the enemies over here on the right. Wasn't the right play. He might not have actually done it on purpose. He may have just been running through that route, not checking the radar, and then next thing you know, he just ran straight into it. We've got a couple of bot drops going off to our right now, though, so we've got more than a few enemies to deal with. And then this is where I make a bit of a big mistake. PT's over here. I judged that he would be moving over to the left more and continue running, and then I threw this in, and then sadly enough, we've got one of those glorious sacrifice moments. But thankfully, I'm quick with throwing in those reinforcement stratagems, so we're able to get him back within, a few seconds. He's definitely not lacking on the department of being able to be called back in, but sadly enough, that was one of those instances where misjudged the whole situation, and had I not been on push to talk, I could have told him to just keep running, and maybe it would have been beneficial for him. But overall, we're not going to be worrying about those reinforcements. But a good rule of thumb is to constantly keep moving, advancing ahead of whatever it is you're facing off with. Sadly enough, S3 ended up timing out, and then at this moment I noticed that we had basically passed one of the hard drives, so I decided this is one of those moments where I'm going in for a solo mission. Looks pretty dangerous. We've got multitude of bot drops that just came in from that location over there where S3 had notified things. You'll see on the minimap on the right, there is a lot of red dots, but maintaining stealth is going to be one of your strongest plays when it comes to the highest difficulties. you are going to be able to go under the radar, and as long as you can do that, you can avoid a lot of that conflict and a lot of mishaps where you get stuck in situations where you're completely surrounded. If you can keep looking at that radar and noticing where some of those enemies are, looking for those red dots and trying to move around those patrols, it's going to be probably one of the most beneficial beneficial things that you can do for yourself. As you'll notice, I'm at one of the main objectives right now. I'm taking out 2 of those bots, and then I'm just putting in the codes, and we're having a very relaxing day. You know, a few times checking the radar just to see whether anything's pushing up on me, but overall we're just trying to maintain complete out of sight. We don't want anything to see us, and we're going to be able to slip out through the fog or dust or sandstorm, if you will, on this planet, find a couple of graves, restock ourselves with some things. But they definitely did start to catch up to us just back there. And at this point, we just head back with the boys and start pushing forward towards the main objective, as they actually went over and got the other hard drive themselves. So we're looking pretty good right now. And then over to my left, I noticed some of those little rock structures that ended up having the super samples. Wasn't sure if the boys needed this, so I decided I was just going to pull over here to the left. It's a little bit different from some of the other structures. Generally, they'll just be at the bottom of this, but we've got a tank over here on our left. I wasn't so sure about it, but over here, Purple decided he's going to be pretty adventurous today, so I decided we're going to pull out the rocket pods and we're going to take out this heavily armored tank with the quickness. We're able to jump up over here to the left, immediately getting one shot by those rocket pods, and then being able to take out the rest of the automatons in this location and grab up each one of those super samples, as well as marking it just to let everybody know that we've got all of those and I'll be the one carrying it. That way, in case anything happens, they'll be able to hopefully know that they need to pick up my samples. Now we've got another one of those shield boys that we just took down. Thankfully, we sped that up because I had a little bit of trouble with that moment. I'm not sure what exactly was happening with my shot, but let's just not talk about it. But moving closer over here, this is going to be one of those moments where we'll actually showcase the power of the Scorcher, taking out the autocannon turret. You will need to hit it in the weak spot in the back. You don't want to shoot it in any other position. You have to get that weak spot, but in one magazine of that Scorcher, you can take down those auto turrets as long as you can get every shot into the back of it. Now, just up ahead from that, you notice I get a little bit panicked over here every time I see rocket dominators. They're just, ooh, man, that is the bane of my existence when the automatons come in. And I even saluted right here. I saw the rockets and I panicked a little bit. I moved over to the left just to get a better position to salute my airstrike coming in. Thankfully, we were able to clear up those rocket dominators and get to the main objective now. I believe we still haven't gotten the 4th just yet. That'll be coming up a little bit later. We've got a wild card that came in. But I noticed there was some bot drops, so I immediately threw over the rocket pods over to the left, and then promptly forgot where to place the actual hard drive, but ended up finding it over to my left and then started up the process. And then you'll notice we've got more of those rocket dominators over here. So I'm throwing in my last rocket pod just to try and clear these up, and that way we can send the Eagle back and get that rearmament. As right after this is the prime example moment where we're going to need the most out of it. Look at how much destruction is going on with these rocket dominators. I mean, they're scary, man. They're probably the scariest thing to me. Every time, I mean, I don't even need to be close to some of those rockets. I can be running full sprint right or left. And this is the moment the power of the Scorcher is the most dangerous. It took 2 shots shooting that little pole in front of me. That was it. That was all she wrote. The Scorcher said, no, you need to look at that pole. You need to make sure that thin little pole is not in our way next time. God, that's frustrating. I can't believe that little itty-bitty line right there is the reason I died. That explosive damage up close, like when I was talking about, you want to be careful next to cover. I mean, you really want to be careful because it literally can take just one shot if you don't have shields up. And you're over, buddy. That's it. That's the only time I died this match. I died to my own gun. And it's happened way too many times before. I mean, that Scorcher is quite dangerous. I mean, it's fun. It's useful against the automatons, but I would highly suggest taking careful aim with this one and being sure that you are not shooting anything close to you when it comes to leaning over certain ledges or providing fire within the third person perspective from certain pieces of cover, because it looks like that thing's going to shoot forward, and then next thing you know, you're just shooting the cover in front of you, and there's nothing more frustrating than that moment. Now, K4 over here is really pushing the front lines. He did not give anybody communication. He is just pushing into multiple bases. He is popping a lot of bot drops straight on top of us. So we're playing a little bit of cleanup duty from the things just behind him. He has just set things in motion to where we've got a little bit of clutter in front of us. So we're kind of holding and maintaining our position and clearing up all of these bots coming in, providing a little bit of cover for some of the teammates. But in this moment, effectively, we just need to push up to where K4 is. We just need to move alongside him. I did hear one of those Gatling shield guys over here to the left, so we'll take care of that really quickly. You don't want one of those sneaking up behind you. We've got a multitude of them over to our left, and I'm pretty much at this point trying to tell H3 over here we just need to get out of dodge. We don't need to be stuck in certain situations like this. Sometimes you don't need to clear every single thing in the area. You just need to clear enough of a path to make forward movement. As the biggest thing is, you really aren't getting anything out of just destroying massive amounts of enemies. It's just something that's going to be on the scoreboard at the end. You're not getting any more of that XP. You're not getting anything additional out of it. I kind of wish there was something tied to that, almost like there's like leaderboards or something with how many of the automatons or all the enemies you have ended up killing. And that was a beautiful headshot. We got that Hulk in just one shot right there, and we're slowly pushing our way over where K4 is. I believe we had H3 end up timing out, or possibly just left. He died for one too many times, I suppose. He had enough. I've had it happen so many different times in Helldive difficulty. There are so many different people where it's, I guess, like after their fourth or fifth death, they're just done with it. They just don't want anything to do with it. They just end up throwing that cape to the side, stopping the fight for democracy, and heading back to civilian life. I mean, I guess a jellyfish has got to be placed somewhere, you know. It's part of the food chain, I suppose. But moving on from that point, we notice there is, you know, we're pushing up on K4, and P2 gets a little bit froggy over here. Decides he's going to aggro all these enemies over here. I'm not sure if he notices that we've got a large amount over on the left side, but since he started poking the tiger, well, guess what? We're going to have to tussle with the rest of them. There's a full-on pack out here, and they're hungry for our blood. And then we get old P3 over here joining in right after, and man, he came in with a super fan on that mic. Had to mute that with the quickness. You know, it was one of those moments where it didn't even matter whether or not I possibly was going to die in that moment. I had to get rid of that with the quickness. But you'll notice we've had to reposition, we've had to move back. I've thrown out all of my available airstrikes at this point. It's on cooldown, and we're in a bit of a pickle in this situation. In these instances, your best bet is to try and move along as much cover as possible. We've got two people down just behind me. I was able to get the stem in and then get around the corner, throw out the reinforcement, and then just keep pushing forward, slowly but surely trying to eliminate the things that are just behind me, but we're going to try and focus on just the melees that are pushing just behind us. You'll notice that guy doesn't have any arms, and I'm just going to avoid dealing with that one for right now because he's not really going to be able to deal any damage. And this is the number one reason why the Redeemer is always going to beat the Revolver. How many times are you going to get that done with a Revolver right there? It is just quick work out of some of these smaller bots and smaller enemies, and you're going to get a multitude out of just one magazine, as long as you can work it right. But as you're pushing through, you may find yourself in situations where you end up just running into enemies, and in those situations, it may be your best bet to try and take them out as quickly as possible, as getting those smaller bots out of the way is one of your best bets at stopping those bot drops from coming in the future. So immediately I just went in for that melee and then started throwing in some things, and I believe I kind of put myself into a bad situation over here. I would say you don't want to drop down into the hole where P2 was right now, but I just kind of stuck with it and then went through, and then we've got some more rocket devastators over here, so I decided I'm throwing in one of those airstrikes, one of the last ones we have available, and then we've only got 3 of our rocket pods available at this point, or we have 1 more airstrike and 3 of the rocket pods left, and we are just about to find ourselves at the extract. I timed this very poorly. I started throwing out the rest of my airstrikes, and I think I timed it to the point where I just called in for rearmament, even though I still had 1 airstrike and 3 of those rocket pods. I should have kept those with me, and then I probably would have had a little bit more use out of it. As you'll notice, we're getting into some dangerous territory right now. And these moments right here are when you save the grenades for. If you're stuck in a situation where you've got no cover in front of you, you've got nothing to really work with, and you've got a large amount of those bots, or the medium bots specifically in front of you like there, you're going to need to start tossing those nades to get that stun lock capability and either just be able to completely eliminate that group in front of you, if not just completely disarm them. Because you'll notice we've got one of those Gatling guys over here on our left. He's got no shield and no arm left. He's still somehow making it after that impact grenade. I mean, he's not making it back home, that's for sure. But we've got a ton of enemies over here, and there is such a blinding amount of light with this fog and sandstorm. It is so hard to see some of these enemies. I mean, it's a cool planet. I really like the aesthetic of it, but man, there are some moments where it is so painful to not be able to see, and then next thing you know, all you see is just lasers coming through at you, or rockets. That is, you gotta love that aimbot nature. But we're really closing in down to the wire. You know, that was one of those moments where I was able to pop the grenades out, throw myself over to the outside edge. A lot of times you may find that it's your best bet to kind of circle around the outside edge of some of these extraction points. You don't necessarily want to stick right on the extraction itself. You want to make sure that the enemies are kind of dancing around the outside edge, but not go so far outside that it stops the shuttle from coming in. That's the kind of major play to deal with right there. But you notice we're just dropping in everything. We've got pretty much a very, very clear extraction point, and it's just making our life a whole lot easier. And with that loadout, I mean, we had pretty much everything we needed available to us at every given moment as we're pushing through. As long as you're putting yourself in positions of power and moving in a smart way, you're going to be able to make it with this type of loadout. And even if all the rest of the teammates are gone, you can hold your own. Sadly enough, with this gameplay footage, it may not have showcased every bit of the raw power of it. If you'd like to see some solo gameplay footage with this, I can put that up there. I can start working on that one. I've got some from the past with this exact build that I got done, but I can also just run some new ones, try to get some that are like 12 minutes long instead of this full-on like 36-minute long one where I've got to speed it up and make sure that it's just not almost like an hour long. It's ridiculous. I could have easily had this one be a 50-minute video, but I knew not everybody's trying to sit down for that long. But hopefully this has been some information that was helpful for you, especially when it comes to just how to run through some of these missions, some of those small tips. I'll be doing some more videos like this in the future where it's not so heavy on the length, as we're trying to just kind of like focus on the capability of shortening it up. But if you'd like to see more of this content, hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to see some of this content live, hit that link down in the description. Follow me over at Twitch. We're streaming every day. And on that note, have a good one.